We do welcome all of you here tonight. And as our brother French said in the service this morning, we had something special planned for this evening. And indeed, it is a special occasion. And I'm sure we're all very, very delighted to be here. You know, I've had a secret desire in my heart since President Reagan and Vice President Bush were elected for the first time in 1980, that perhaps the day might come when Vice President Bush might be able to visit our campus. I felt especially close to him in the sense that his mother was residing here on Jupiter Island and that she was a very, very dear friend and supporter of our school. And I thought, well, maybe one day that might be possible. But I was not expecting it as suddenly as things developed just since yesterday afternoon. And it indeed is a joy tonight to have our Vice President, his wife, and his mother visiting with us in this service. And it takes, it's just a real joy for me to have the privilege of introducing them to you tonight. And so without saying anything further, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome to our campus the Vice President of the United States.
Thank you. I just wish that I could clap as loud as all that accumulation of your welcoming me to say how moved we Bushes, I can only speak for three of us here tonight, you got us outnumbered, that by that magnificent music, by what this college means to this community, and really what you stand for, you'll be pleased to know you don't have to hear two sermons tonight, because I was asked by Mr. Olson and Reverend Whitaker, Reverend Finch, just to come by and say a few words. And if you're as suspicious of politicians as I am, I know you won't believe that's what's about to happen to you. But I do want to pay my respects to Mr. Herron, the founder of this great institution, and to those who lead this institution, and to those students who participate in it and make it what it is. And I really didn't know what to say except thank you for the influence you are in this community, influence for good, influence for believing, and maybe that would have been enough. But then I got thinking back, and I won't relive with you the campaign from which the President and I just emerged and the opposition just emerged, because it would be wrong to kind of bring that into this spectacular hall, this beautiful service, except to say that there was some talk early in the campaign, a lot about religion, and whether the President and then to some degree this Vice President were trying to merge church and state. And we weren't trying to merge church and state, but he feels, our President feels, and I feel, that if you're going to be a public servant, that God certainly has a place of first importance in one's life. And we are one nation under God. And that isn't going to change, and that should not be eroded out of our sense of service or our participation as a member of this choir or a member of the clergy or an attendant at this service. We are one nation under God, and that's what makes us strong. That's where we get the strength, and that's what the young people in this college are learning from the leaders here. Not just one nation under God, but you're learning a great deal about faith, the dependency on Jesus Christ as a Savior, the dependency on the Lord. And that, I think, is the strength of our country. And I wish you could have gone with me across our country. I know, we're in the TV age, and everything is done for television. You stand next to a waste site and you get your picture taken, or you're down in a coal mine, or you're at a shipyard, or you're riding like I was in a fast boat today with 1,200 horsepower and those big seas out there, and everything, I suppose, has a certain media sense to it. But as I traveled across this country for the second time in a national campaign, the first being in 1980, why, I found that there was something much more than the 18 seconds on television at the top of the news. Because what I found, and even in a campaign environment, was what I sense here tonight. A community, young, some older, let's face it, 60 years old, with a commitment, in our case, to Jesus Christ, the Christian ethic, the teachings of the Lord. And you know, it's all across our country. I've been to 59 countries around the world since I've been vice president. And some of those countries believe, and I'll just share one observation with you, and some don't. I attended 2 funerals in Moscow, one for Mr. Brezhnev and one for Andropov. And I was telling my own parish in Houston, Texas, about the funerals, and they did it beautifully with a regimented military steps, and right the minute that beautiful clock in St. Peter's Square sounded 12 o'clock, the thing went off right by the numbers. They took the body and laid it to rest, but there was no joy. There was no spirit of the Lord. There was no believing in the hereafter. A society of, certainly some of those people are kind and decent people, but they had eroded out by a tough totalitarian system what we take for granted every day of our lives, that we are one nation under God. And I can tell you, I wish you'd have sensed it, and been there to understand what it is like. Barbara and I lived in China, in a communist country. And they eroded away the belief. Now it's coming back a little, because Christianity is always going to have a place, you know. But it was, when Mother came to visit us, our daughter was baptized in a church out there in China, and there was maybe like 8 Chinese people in this church, because you weren't really permitted to do that kind of thing. And yet we'd see day in and day out, I felt a yearning for Jesus Christ and for belief in something greater than the Marxist-Leninist society. We saw it in China. We saw it in the regimented steps of a beautifully run service, but a service that had no hope. There was no faith, and there was no belief in the hereafter, and no belief that when a leader or a peasant or whoever it is laid to rest, that they can know the joy of Jesus Christ. And so I would simply come here, as I say, not to give the sermon, but to say how deeply I feel privileged in my family to have been brought up as believers, to have a wife who feels that way, a mother who feels that way, and simply say, never take for granted the fact, and never retreat from the fact that we are, luckily, in a privileged sense, one nation under God. Thank you very much.